Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk Real Estate. Woo! We are here located at the New England Christian Television Network in Randolph, Massachusetts. And so we have a studio audience here. And so as you guys know, we gather once a month to talk about how to use real estate as a wealth creation tool. We personally believe that real estate is the lowest hanging fruit on the wealth creation tree. And so we gather together as a group to talk about how do we practically get that done. And so we want to thank Eddie Jules and his staff here at the network. They allow us to come in here for free in order to hold this meetup. And so we thank God for them. And we say if the best way to say thank you is to give something back. Mm-hmm. And so there should be a QR code coming up there where you can sow into this ministry, sow into this network. And so if you don't do it now, but make sure you do that because it takes money to run anything, including a network. And so we want to be a blessing to the network because not only does it do this type of quality program, it does a lot of obviously things, preaching the word and so on and so forth, but as a cooking show and a workout show and a lot of things that will not only advance you spiritually, but help you with your money and your health and relationship things of nature. So make sure you do that. And then also the second commercial is we are having our real estate Wealth Creation Summit. That's on June 10th. Woo-hoo! We are about a month out, and so that should be up on the screen at some point during this as well. But yeah, there it goes side by side. So there's a QR code on there that you can go to sign up. There's an early bird up until I think May 10th or so, and then after that is it's $147 until then, and then after that it is $197. And so we got 150 people who will be there. And so I want to make sure you're there. We have talked about the importance of being in the room and getting around people who are like-minded. Some of you who are of faith, which many of you will be or are. We talk about iron sharpening iron. And so that's going to be a time where a lot of us getting together talking about how do you use real estate as a wealth creation tool. So make sure you're there. Even if you can't make it, sponsor somebody else. I've been telling people who have kids, send your kids. Get them out your house.
Yeah. Teach them something.
Teach them something so they can get out your crib. And so you want to send them there. All right. So that's all my commercial for tonight. Last month we started around looking at how do you design your projects for your real estate. Actually, how you design your house for a real estate project, because it's very different than when you're doing your own particular home. And so we had a lovely guest here last month, someone I know quite well. We've been married for, my wife Kendra Jenkins, we've been married for 26 years and a couple weeks. But she's also my business partner and life partner, so we do a lot of things together. But I didn't bring her on because she's pretty and good looking, and I want to look at her, and I brought her on because she's very knowledgeable in the area of design. All the projects that we've done, Kendra has been the mastermind of it. And not only that, but I've learned to trust her judgment and things. So people will say to me, what should we do, Pastor? I'm like, whatever she tell you to do, just do it. Because she has a great eye for things and can see things that I can't see and a lot of people can't see. And it turns out beautiful most of the time, opposite 90%, 99.9% of the time. You ain't 100%, you like Clorox. Okay. 99.9%. Okay. It clears it up. So last month, we hit a few things that talk about design. I'm going to hit them right quick, and then we're going to turn this program back over to Kendra. So we said 5 tips from last one. We said, number one, remember that this is not your personal residence, right? Yeah. What is it? This is not your personal residence. This is not my house. Mm-hmm. And so that will be something that you will be fighting until the day you stop doing this. It's something Kendra and I talk about. We always say, listen, we're not living here. Mm-hmm. So that's number one. Number two, we talk about over designing can cost you money. Mm-hmm. And so what you want to do is make sure you don't want to cheap out and have cheap materials in your projects and things of that nature, but you can't also over design. Mm-hmm. And so it's based off a number of things. One of it is whether it's going to be a fix and flip or whether it's going to be a buy or hold. That's one thing, but also the community that you're living in. And so if I'm doing a project in New Bedford, it would be much different than me doing something in Newton or Wellesley or whatever else. Yeah. So you don't want to over design. The number three we talked about last month is no difference between designing for a rental property versus a fix and flip. Now, a rental property simply means that I'm getting it and then I'm fixing it up and then I'm gonna rent it out for buy, hold, and cash flow to my family, so to speak. And then a fix and flip is what I'm doing is I'm buying a project, and then what I'm doing is I'm flipping it to an end buyer. And so those are two very different mindsets when it comes to designing for your project. So you got no difference between that. Number 4, which we'll hit on really big tonight, is you don't have to spend big dollars. You can make something look really nice with a minimal budget. And so my wife is going to talk a lot about that tonight. And then the 5th thing we talked about, or maybe we didn't mention it, but I'll mention tonight, enlist the help of others. Meaning, if you don't know what you're doing, get some help. And there are a lot of ways you can do that. You can enlist someone like my wife to help you out, or a lot of times when you go to stores, they have people right there in the store who will help you put together a design. And so if you say, hey, Dexter, I'm just not good at that, well, there is a lot of people who can help you get your project together. So that, in a nutshell, that was what we really covered last month. If you want to go back and look at that show, you can go on actually NECTN YouTube channel and pull that back up, and you can get caught up from last month. And then this month, what we want to do is be more really hands-on and practical. And so we actually went to Floor and Decor and did a couple of things. Floor and Decor, that was it, right? Just went to Floor and Decor, grabbed some materials. And so we want to give you some hands-on experience with that tonight. So without further ado, hand it over to my lovely wife, Kendra Jenkins.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So so we're going to talk tile today, because if anybody's ever been to Floor and Decor, it can be overwhelming.
Yes, it can.
And I think last time we met, we were talking about making sure that you are designing for the style of the house in which you are doing. Right. I think we've all walked into a house. If you do this long enough, you'll walk into a colonial and they'll have modern fixturing in there, and it just looks really out of place. So it's staying core to what the house was. And there's some vanilla houses out there that you can do basically what you want to, but there are some, especially in this New England area, where we truly have to sort of stick to it. Is it a colonial? Is it a traditional house? Is it a modern house? Is it a mid-century house? And basically what we did, we went to Floor and Decor, and we're going to do a little bit of a case study tonight. So when you're looking to do tiling or flooring, you are going to ask your contractor to tell you the square footage in which you need to cover. That's floors, that's backsplashes. So it's kitchen floors, it's any floor at all.
True.
You know, you're gonna determine, for the floors in the house, are there hardwood floors that can be redone? If there is, it's like a gold mine, because you're basically spending no money to get really nice floors. Is it that you have a budget for carpet? Because carpet is the cheapest thing to put in a house. Or are you going to do tile? And we're going to spend a lot of time on tile tonight, because when you go into any type of, even a smaller tile store, the options are almost limitless. And it's really sort of hard to get yourself there. So we're going to talk about different types of tile tonight, and then how to lay those things out. So we're going to have some slides at the end of the day, at the end of the presentation, that will show us just different ways to lay things out. So we have a whole presentation here to go over, and as people were gathering tonight, we went through and like, what's the most expensive one? What's the cheapest thing? So Eddie's kindly put that up for me, which is great. And so in this area, we have some hardwood, some flooring or hardwood, and some laminate options. And then we have a whole bunch of tile that could be used for a myriad of applications. But if you just look even at this, the hardwood, the flooring. So the first one here is a hardwood floor. And I don't think I'm on camera, sorry. So this one here is a hardwood floor, and this would be the most expensive in what I've just presented tonight. And the reason for that is it's hardwood floor. It's the best of the best, and there's a variation. You can spend $3 a square foot on hardwood floor. You can spend $20 a square foot on hardwood floor. The other thing too is this is a hardwood floor-ish type product, where they've taken wood, sawdust, things of that nature, and sort of pasted it together and come up with this.
Like a hot dog.
Like a hot dog. This is some vinyl plank flooring, and this is another type of vinyl plank flooring. And just to go over the pricing with you all, because there's a lot of, just even there's 4 options here. I tried to get them in sort of in the same color family of what you're looking for, right? Because a dark floor shows every piece of dust known to man. So it's hard to keep clean. So this flooring here, this hardwood flooring, is $5.79 a square foot. and this one is $399. This third one is $149, and this one is actually $507, right? So if you've gotten your contractor to give you the square footage, you could easily, based on those numbers, figure out how much it's going to take. And the cool thing about Floor & Decor, or most tile stores, you can go on their website, see which one you want, say how much square footage it is, and they'll tell you how much it's going to cost. So that's part of the equation. That's part of the equation is the actual materials. The other part of the equation is the actual labor.
Right.
So you have to ask your contractor, you know, how much will it be to install this, right? So it's not just getting something, picking something you like and it being in budget. You have to have the whole budget in mind. And they will tell you these laminates are much easier to put down. They basically put glue down and they slap it down and they're done. Where there's a lot of cutting involved in hardwood floor and there's a lot of measuring and things of that nature, right? These things, all these prefabbed things come in a standard size and they sort of lay it out and cut as little as possible. So you just have to really get down to the details with your contractor. So that's a big important part here. And so then when we go to the tile selection, I was trying to prove a point here. There's a million white tiles out there, right? You could go into Floor & Decor. I could have bought 100 more. And when you go in, you're just like, how am I going to choose? You see people picking up samples and just wandering around the store. And you really have to go in sort of with what am I looking for? Like, what's my budget? Because when you're doing a flip, and we've gone through this a couple times with folks, we have an extensive spreadsheet that we do with folks to really go down to the detail of everything that we're going to spend. You buy a house, you get a contractor in there, you ask them, you know, tell them what you want to do, you get to see if that is, the contractors are a good leveling, because you'll have this pie in the sky, this is what I want to do, and then they bring you right back to reality when they tell you how much it's going to cost. And you know your budget, right? So you've already said, like, I bought this house, I purchased this house for this much, here's my budget for the renovation, and you have to work within that to make money. And I think where people get really caught is that they get really emotional about it and they don't stick to their budget. Because if you don't stick to your budget, it's one thing, you can go a little over budget if you're keeping the house because you'll make that up at the end through the life cycle or the life that you've had with this home. But if you're flipping it, you've got a one and done situation of making money on this house. So to go through the tile, so I'm going to just run this off for you from a square footage perspective. This tile is, can you see my hand? You can. It's number 5, it's $3.45 a square foot. This number 6 is $7.77 a square foot. No, that was wrong. $7.77. Number 7 is a smaller tile, but it's $5.56 a square foot. Number 8 is $15.48 a square foot. I hope you're getting the understanding, like, it really varies about how much this stuff costs. This is marble. I put it in here, but I probably shouldn't have because people caught on right away. $13.56 a square foot. Number 10 is $3.57 a square foot. $3.96. $5.96. Number 13 is $3.16, and number 14 is $3.59. And the reason why you have to get down to the brass tacks of things of like, how much is this going to cost a square foot? The other thing too, I think we talked about it last time we met, is that the larger the tile, the cheaper the install.
Right.
Because they have to cut less, it covers more square footage. So we might like number 14, which is the biggest tile that we have out here, and it's coming in at $3.59. You just have to sort of lay out your options. I like this and this. Okay, how long, you have to ask your contractor how much it's going to be to lay that out. We talked about one of the houses that we did in Brockton, and we just didn't have a big budget. I bought the largest format tile. It was 24 by 24. When it was going to go from the front door all the way through the hallway, the kitchen, the bathroom, the side room, because that way it's one consistent look. It's really easy to lay. There wasn't a lot of cuts, and they could do it in a very short amount of time. A lot of the times, your contractors are subcontracting hourly people. So it's by hour that they're paying them. So if it's going to be super quick for that, that sub to do that, that factors into your equation of like which tile to choose. So I think it's just an interesting thing when you lay it all out, because sometimes you look at something like, oh, I feel like that's more money than I want to spend, but you have to do the math of it. Like, what is it actually a square foot? And what is it going to cost to lay that tile? And your contractor will be super helpful. When we work with ours, it's like, all right, give me the backsplash square footage, the flooring square footage, whatever square footage we need. They put it all down on a piece of paper, and then we go shopping.
Right.
We go shopping, and you can't really probably see it on camera, but this one has a lot of variation. It's sort of bubbly. A lot of the rest of them are flat. This one's have a little more movement to it. The other thing about tile is this one is very matte finish. You're not going to get any bounce of light off of this at all. Where this one is shiny, you can see that the light bounces off of it. And why that's important is if you have a dark space in a home, this one's shiny too. We've used this one actually in a bathroom. It comes out really nice. If you have a dark space in a home, you can still use a sort of darkish tile if you want, but it has to be shiny because the light has to bounce off of it. So if you ever walk into something and it's very matte, it's just there's no life to it, and it's very dull. Now, this is a beautiful tile. It's a marble tile. It's beautiful. And maybe we love that tile, so we're going to do that. But maybe that's the backsplash, and then the countertop is a shiny material, or the paint is a semi-gloss paint. So there's just a lot of options out there, but not to intimidate. You just have to rationalize, I have this much to spend on this. What is my best option to cover whatever I'm trying to cover, and what are the other elements that I need to consider? There's cost, there's what the aesthetic is that you're trying to do, and sometimes you will choose, let's just say you have a really small bathroom or a really small kitchen. Tile is a great way to make it wow, right? So if you have a really small kitchen in a house, it's not great from a resale perspective. So let's just say we're flipping this house and you have a really small kitchen. You can sort of splurge on that tile on the backsplash or somewhere else in that kitchen, because people are going to be like, wow, that's super cool. Mm-hmm. But you didn't spend a ton of money because the square footage is so small. Sure. Right. We did this to really ramp up a bathroom that we did that was really, I think it was a 5x5 bathroom.
Yeah,
it was tiny bathroom. But we did penny tile, which is actually one of my favorite tiles. We did penny tile. It was, appropriate for the house. We did it on the floor and into the shower pan to make it look bigger. And then we're going to go over some tile formats. We took it and we did a stack, and we went up all the way up the wall and up onto the ceiling, because it drew the eye up. Right. And so when you walked into that really small bathroom, first people were like, ooh, this is super cool. And it made it look bigger than it was. The people didn't have oh my goodness, this bathroom's really small. It was a small, but it was a full, there was a 3-piece bathroom. It was a full, it was a full bath. Technically, from the size of it, should have been a half bath, but it was a full bath. It was a full bath when we got there. So we knew that we had the plumbing.
And you want to keep that.
And you want to keep it, because if you can get a full bath instead of a half bath, you're just in just a better situation. So those are some tile choices, but it's really, you have to do the math. And let's just say so the interesting thing about a flip is, especially if you have to do mechanicals, you have to do the plumbing, you had to do the electricity, you had to do a roof, there's certain things that have to be done in a house, right? Brought up to code and things of that nature. These are the last things that you're doing, the finishing work, and you really have an opportunity to sort of get your budget back on track if you've spent more in those places than you planned to at the beginning of your journey, right? So it's all the best laid plans, right? And usually it never works out the way you think it's going to. And it was funny, we were walking through a flip yesterday, and when you're renovating a house in its entirety, there are probably a million decisions to be made, right? So it is. I was being kind. There's just a lot of decisions, and it can get really overwhelming. Excuse me. But it's one of those things where you're just you have a rough plan, and the big things usually always get done. There's certain things that just have to be done, right? You walk in and the bathroom's trash, you have to do the bathroom. So all the big stuff gets done, but you might have had a vision, and then the dollars and cents come into it. This is a place where you can save so much money because the finishes, I rattled off all those numbers. You can go from, spending $10 a square foot or spending $1 something a square foot, right? But you can still make it look great, and it's all brand new and it's lovely. Right. I'm going to ask Eddie to show the different ways, the different patterns of tile that we can, that you have an opportunity to do. So what I did is I went and I picked a tile. I think it might have been number 12. And you can lay it in different ways. So it's number 12, I believe, is a cheaper tile. And you can lay it different ways. So the first one is this brick, I call it a brick lay, but it's also called offset. It's what we're usually thinking about it being, right? It's a traditional way of laying tile, which is perfectly fine. You have a traditional house and and it's the easiest thing. Everybody knows how to lay it, right? So there's this brick lay. And then Eddie, do you want to go to the second one? So then you can modernize that and just turn it on its head. So then that's what we did in these bathrooms to make it look longer. So this tile you can't actually get really traditional subway tile anymore. They don't make it because nobody wants it, because that was like a 3x6, if you will. This is, I think I chose like a 4x6 or something like that, but it was longer. It might have been a 4x8. Right. But either way, you can just turn that brick lay and onto its, turn it vertical, and you are able, what it does, it gives you height in however you do it. So when you lay it on a horizontal, it makes things look longer. If you lay things on up and down, it makes things look larger and taller. So let's just say you're battling a house that doesn't have really high ceilings. Lay it that way because it makes it tricks the eye to go up, and so it makes it look bigger. The other thing about that is make it light and bright, right? Just let the sun make it shiny, let the sun bounce off of the lights that you're going to use, and and it's no different than them laying it this way. Right. They're just going to lay it this way, and it just draws your eye up and allows you to have height that's actually not there, which is awesome. It's a great play on the eye. And the next one is a vertical stacked. So it's the same thing. It's going up, but it's more modern, right? So it's just the same tile, and you're just laying it, and it's an interesting look. It just depends on what you're doing, right? So if you're doing a more modern house or a house that's more mid-century modern, this would go with that. But it's another way. These are all the same tile. So I just want to point that out. Like every tile, every different variation we're showing you is the same exact tile, but you're getting a completely different look. And then the next one is a stacked horizontal. So same thing, right? Still stacked, but we put it on the horizontal. So you're getting more length, right? And honestly, if you flip through this, if you didn't know, you might think they were different tiles that we're looking at, but it is just a different look, and it gives you just a different aesthetic in that as you are laying them out in these different patterns. I think we have a couple more. So this is my terrible attempt at herringbone. I'll show you another picture that's a little bit different. I was struggling with this when I was doing it, but herringbone's another way to do it. Yep. But I will say to do a herringbone is the most expensive way to lay tile because it takes a lot of time, and it has to be really precise because if it's wrong, it all just sort of leans over. So they don't really like to do herringbone. The good news is that if you're using smaller format tile, like the ones that come on the mesh, if you can do a herringbone there very easily because the manufacturer's already done it for you. But if you want something larger than that, it's definitely sort of something to it's a cool look, but it's gonna cost you more from a labor perspective. So you might not have spent a lot on the tile, but the labor will be more. Right. And I think we have one more graphic to go to. Yep, and here's all the different types of styles and there's many more. But basically that offset that I showed you, and then there's this 1/3 offset. They call it a step. I called it a vertical brick lay. The stacked horizontal, there's a good example of the herringbone, a block herringbone, and then a basket weave is sort of cool too. So if you notice, it's like 3 tiles going horizontal, 3 tiles going vertical, and that's a really cool look too. Again, same exact tile, And from a installation perspective, I've never done the basket weave, but I wouldn't think that it's any major shakes, to be perfectly honest with you, because they're just like laying it here and laying it there. So, but those are, I hope you got you understood what I was trying to or lay out there. Is you can take any kind of tile and lay it out there in many different ways and get a completely different look to what you're doing with not. So when we talked about last time we were together, that you can do this not so much on the cheap, but you can take something and make it, make it look really, really elegant, really, really cool. People like will walk in and be like, oh, look at that tile. But it's like, it's like no big shakes. What we don't have here is any examples of grout. And so
exactly, I'm about to say, hit the grout. Yeah.
So unfortunately, I forgot my little grout thing. But if you go to Flooring Decor, they'll give you like all these grout options. And legitimately, when we first started this, I thought there was one grout, white.
No.
There is so many types of grout, and a lot of people are doing white tile with a dark grout. If you like that contrast, you can do light tile with a gray grout. You can do gold. You can go blue. You can do purple. Like you can get grout in anything that you want. And it's really just basically, what do you want it to look like? Right. So if you want, like if you're doing a basket weave, that last one that we showed you, it would behoove you to do a darker grout because that way you see that pattern, right? But if you're not, but if you're doing something where you just sort of want some texture, you don't want it to really stand out because you're doing something else that's bold in the kitchen or in the bathroom, you can just do a white grout or a really light gray grout so that it sort of blends in. So you get a little movement, but you don't have to be concerned. You don't want it to be the star, because sometimes you want the tile to be the star, and sometimes you just want it needs to be there because it serves a purpose, especially in your kitchen and your bathroom, and so your walls don't fall apart. But you just want it to sort of be there. So let's just say you did a bold. You want the floor to be the star. You did a bold tile on the floor. I don't recommend it, but you can do that. If you're keeping the house for your personal use, fine, but you don't want to ever choose a tile, and I didn't bring any with us today that are super patterny, that where someone's going to walk in and be like, like if there's a strong, if you're with somebody, you're like, oh, I love this, and they're like, oh, you need to sort of take a pause and say, will that deter someone from buying this house, right? So you've done this whole house over, you've worked on it, it's been months and months, and you want people to walk in and be like, oh my goodness, this is so beautiful, and I can see myself here. Right. And when you make things too specific, people can appreciate what you did, but maybe they're like, I don't know if I'm gonna do this. It's not for me. So you want to. It's that fine balance of like making it look really nice, but speaking to the masses. So, but the grout is really an interesting thing. That definitely the trend right now is to do darker grout. You see that everywhere, where everybody's doing, especially in bathrooms. It's like some kind of light tile with a dark grout, and then they're doing even the shower surrounds. Like if it's a glass enclosure, there's black around it as opposed to metal, like a silver of some kind or a brass. So it just depends on what you want it to look like, for sure. Right. But so even what we just talked about, we talked about how much square footage, what's the budget, how much, what kind of tile do we want to choose, what kind of grout do we want to choose. So that's just alone. That's 4 decisions that you need to make on that. And so,
but I think you said a lot around, tile and grout and such and so forth. So let you take a breathing second.
Sounds good.
Any questions out there in the audience? Actually, I don't think we got the mic. Okay.
All this is new to me.
Hold on one second for the mic, Mom Barbara.
Thank you. What is backsplash?
So if you're in a kitchen, so you have your cabinets, you have your countertop, and then the tile behind it is the backsplash.
Okay.
Yep. And basically it's to save your walls because there's so much water and you're cleaning and you're cooking and you're doing all these things, right? Okay. So sometimes you'll see in a house where they don't put a backsplash up, but they'll do whatever the countertop was, they'll do a sort of a 3 to 4 inch around, right? So that way there's no water getting behind your cabinets and basically destroying things. So that's what a backsplash is.
Okay.
Great question.
And you were talking about the first one is the
hardwood?
Yes. And you were talking about cutting. Okay, say if a person had, they were tiling, and I don't know, do they put do they put like a glue or something?
Depends on what they're putting down. So if you're tiling, they're going to use a mortar mix on the floor. So basically, they clean the floor up, remove any debris and things of that nature, and then they actually, it's called a thin set. But it looks like cement, but it's just not going to get that hard. So they put that down, and then they're placing the tiles and making sure that they're level using that. And then they lay all the tiles out. They let that cure overnight usually, and then what they have to do is they have to come back with the grout, because what the grout is doing is filling all the holes in, right? So usually they're using tile spacers in between, and that's the other thing that you have to ask them.
Yeah.
Like what they'll ask you, how thick do you want the grout line? You know what I mean? There's like, it gets down to that specific, because if you do a larger grout line, you're really going to see it.
Right.
You do a smaller one, you're going to see it less, right? So if you're using a dark grout, and let's just say you went really thick, it's going to look really odd, right? It's going to look dirty. But basically, they come through with the grout, and then they have to wipe that off, and then your floor is done from a tile perspective. With hardwood floor, they're basically, you just have to have a good subfloor. So usually it's plywood, and for instance, we just had hardwood floors put in our first floor. We wanted to save our hardwood floors. They just were beyond. They just couldn't save them, but they created a great subfloor. So they just went on top of those. They were, they were level enough. We have an old house that's going to not be so level, but they just went on top of what we already had. But you have to, with hardwood, it has to have a good base. So let's just say you went into a house and there was water damage. They will have to, doesn't matter what you're putting on the floor, they will have to remediate wherever the subfloor has failed. And so that you have a good place to put stuff.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a question too. Not being originally from this area, learning things about types of houses, like colonials, Victorians, Gambles, that's kind of local to this area.
Right.
So I'm not sure if I go into, say, an old colonial house, I live in one, what kind of fixtures, what kind of look would I go for, do you think?
Yeah, so for me, I put sort of Victorians and colonials into a traditional category, right? Because usually you're walking in and there's beautiful woodwork, hopefully that's still there, and a nice fireplace and things of that nature. So you're trying to, like we said last time, really like go through and be like, these are the great things about this house, right, that I want to keep, and I'm going to marry up whatever finishes I put in that will make them shine. So for instance, we're doing, it's an old farmhouse, but there's definitely like Victorian parts to it, because there's pocket doors, and a wealthy farmer lived there, I guess is what I would say. But we were like, oh my goodness, we're saving these floors, and we're saving this molding, we're saving these pocket doors and all those things. So when we're thinking about what the finishes will be, they unfortunately took up the hardwoods in the kitchen and all the hardwoods in the bathrooms and the bedrooms and all that stuff. So basically we'll be choosing a very traditional sort of plain tile, to be perfectly honest with you, to run through those places. And we're doing carpet in the for economics, doing carpet in the bedrooms. But it's one of those things where when you walk in, and I don't have any examples of it here, but you walk in, that might be something where you're going to get a marble type look, but it's in a porcelain as opposed to the marble, because the marble's super pricey, right? So what the tile companies have done a great job of is like recreating things to make them look, give you a look of something, but you don't have to pay for it. So you can buy a porcelain tile or a ceramic tile that looks like marble, but it's not, right? So instead of paying, tons of money per square foot, you're not paying a whole bunch, but you get the look that you want. So it's one of those things where when I walk in to a tile store or wherever, I sort of know like I need traditional things. So that sort of like excludes like all the other stuff I don't need to look at. I'm like, I'm looking for this. But for instance, honestly, all of the things that I purchased could go into the house we're doing. Exactly. Everything on this table could go into the house that we're doing, even that gray, because it's a traditional type tile, right? Right. And so I get to you can do that. But the flooring, the cool thing is, and when you go to these shops, is that they'll tell you what the purpose of the tile's for. So you just have to read it. There's a placard on every tile. This is for flooring. This is for, for bathrooms. Like that's what it's made for. Because if you don't read those and you just install something you're not supposed to, it basically won't go well. Like it'll fail pretty quickly in the house. But I would say that most often around here, you're not going to find a lot of modern houses. You know what I mean? You're going to find more traditional, colonial, Victorian. The Victorians are easy. It has all, they're very elaborate, right? They're the painted ladies. They're that type of thing. Or they used to be painted ladies, and now they're sort of sad, or you need to bring them back up to life, right? But you're just playing off of the stuff that's in there. Yeah. And then there's just I would say that's anything from the early 1900s around here. Mm-hmm. And then you get into the 60s were the mid-century modern, and the 70s were your plain Jane houses to a little bit. They jazzed them up with their shag carpet and all that stuff, but you can pretty much do whatever you want in there. But yeah, so it's more of when you're walking in, is there beautiful woodwork? Mm-hmm. You just need to play off of that. If you walk in and our house in New Bedford that we kept is very vanilla. It's older, but it's very vanilla. So it didn't really matter what went in there. We just worked with what we had because we knew we were going to rent it.
Correct.
So we didn't do anything crazy. Okay. Excellent question.
Yeah, and I think going back to what we were talked about up front is because the question that my Bob was asking and Sister Dell was asking, it goes back to your own particular house.
Yes.
Remember, we're doing this as a business. So as a business, you're thinking how generic can I be and how nice can I be at this? So you're weighing both of those, because to your point, you don't want someone to go in and say the house is too specific.
Yep.
Because what happens is most people don't have the imagination to say, well, I can change this out, and these are people, they're spending them up here $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 for my house, and so they're not thinking about I got to go and paint a room and do whatever else. And so you really need to be thinking about the grays, and we'll talk about paint colors, I guess, in a minute. But we'll talk paint colors.
Yeah,
we'll talk paint colors. The different colors that are just very generic. Now they can go and paint. They can paint their own room and all that type of stuff. But from a business standpoint, because that's what we're talking, is you want to have. Everybody should be able to see themselves in the house. We were another flipper. We were at his property in Taunton, and he had a black toilet.
He installed a black toilet.
He installed a black toilet in the house, and he said, "What do you think about that?" And I missed it, but clearly this one didn't. She was like,
"We were standing in the bathroom." And he's like, "What do you think of the bathroom?" I'm like, "What's up with the black toilet?"
Said, that's the first thing she said. Now everything else is pretty nice in the bathroom.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, pretty nice in the bathroom. Then I said, because the guy asked me, and I said, to me, I didn't see anything wrong with it. But then I said, you know what? Let me bring my wife in here. I was like, check this out. And she's like, what's up with the black? First thing she said, what's up with the black toilet? And now the funny part was this.
Because it was the only thing it wasn't like they went for it, right? If you're going to do that, that everything needs to be black.
It was a couple splotches of black here and there. But,
it was just
but it dominated.
Too much for me.
It really dominated the bathroom. And so when he was talking to his wife is the one who wanted the black toilet.
He wanted the black toilet. And
he said, listen, if people come through here and they complain about it, this toilet is coming out. So I don't know what they end up selling. I don't know exactly what happened to it, but that was just an example of, she said I want a black toilet, and we know most of the time in most houses it's a what? It's a white toilet.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to have somebody turned off, and then there's some other funky things in it. They had like a huge step down, like those old.
They had a trip hazard.
Yeah, serious trip hazard.
Because I almost busted.
Because what it was it was a garage at one time.
It was a converted garage.
Mm-hmm. And so they didn't level the floor. So it was a huge step down.
It should have been 2 steps instead of one, and they did one step.
No, it should have been 3 steps because it was actually 2.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah, so it should have been a lot more steps.
Either way, they needed more steps.
But these are design things you have to think about. Of okay, what if someone elderly buys this house, or anybody clumsy?
Even if you weren't clumsy.
And so these are things you have to think about. That there were other things in the house that were somewhat funky. But they ended up selling for a pretty decent profit. But
it took them a while.
Yeah, it took them a little bit. But just how the market switched, and that's another thing because you're also fighting time, because the more intricate you get with some of these things, the more time it's going to take. So if you talk about herringbone or whatever it is, well, that's more time.
Yep.
And so you want your people to get in and get out so you can get it on the market, because you're fighting, in some cases, changing markets, because in real estate, the best time to get on the market is like the spring markets, and then you got summer market, and then you got the fall market. And then when you start getting into wintertime, people are not looking to buy a house. And so I'm looking to try to get in and get out if I'm flipping it. Now, if I'm keeping it, that's something else. So these are also things that not necessarily won't go into your design picks, but it also goes into how you decide to do things, because that is very critical, because we want to, get this done and then maybe move on to another project. And so just something to think about.
Want to talk about paint?
Let's talk about paint.
All right. So exterior paint. I am the type of person that really likes a very saturated color on a house. And I will say that
Now, what is a saturated color? Speak on that.
okay, we'll speak on that. A saturated color. So most houses right now, a lot of people have put siding up, and it's like this light gray or a white. They're very, sort of meh colors, right? And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just more from a standout perspective. So all of you who know me, we live in a giant red house. And that was on purpose. What I did with our house is an old farmhouse. It's the oldest house on the street. And I went to the paint store and I said, what's the there's a palette of traditional exterior colors, and I looked at those and I'm like, which one do I want? And it was the red one. And so that's what we did. And actually the clip we're doing in West Bridgewater, again, it's a farmhouse. It's an older home. I chose the blue. It's a very nice saturated blue, because part of what you're trying to do with your home, especially when it's there's a lot of homes on the market, you need to be able to stand out.
Yeah,
when people are doing these searches on Zillow or Redfin or wherever,
Realtor.com.
everybody's just scrolling through, and you want it to be that they're stopping on your property and looking at it, right? So the house that we flipped last year, that we talked about last time, it was a charcoal gray. I stood in the middle of the street and I'm just like, what are all the house colors?
Right.
What will make this stand out? Because people everybody takes pride in their homes. You know what I mean? Or wants to. Nobody has a home that they're like, I don't want anybody to be happy about this, right? So you want them to, buying a house is a very emotional situation, right? This is where you're going to live. I want to live here. I want to be in this neighborhood. I want to, what are the things that are important to me? And so let's just say there's 10 houses on the street or 10 houses in that neighborhood for sale. You want your house to be the standout, right? But in a really good way, right? So we did the charcoal gray, we did the bright yellow doors. And honestly, because I was like, I want people to stop and be like, oh, that's interesting, right? But I think sometimes you go into some of these flips and they're very, they're not notable, I guess is what I would say. They're nice. There's nothing wrong with them. But sometimes it's like, you want it to be that you're tipping the people over to your side from let's just say there's just comparable houses. You want yours to be that much more, so that people are like, you know what, that's somewhere we're gonna go.
And I think just listening to you talk, I think that's where you can stand out, because you don't want to stand out in your design. You sort of be generic, but paint, like picking a door color and those type of things, you can stand out that way.
Yeah, because bottom line, let's just say you do some funky color on your door, right? And someone's like, okay, I can change that. You know what I mean? That's like a quick change.
Yeah, exactly.
But like if you're like saying you're going to have to jackhammer up the floor, that's a different conversation.
Right.
So you're just trying to make that house shine. You know what I mean? And have people be like, I would like to live here.
Right.
And I think sometimes too is that people don't know they want something till they see it.
True.
So it's one of those things where you're sort of making it shine. And allowing that to speak for itself and draw people into that open house and draw people into making an offer.
I mean, even the yellow door, when we were listening to one of the persons who were talking to us said, I never liked the yellow door until I saw it on your house. So sometimes people don't know what they don't like until they see it, so you can take some chances sometime in some of those areas.
Yeah, and the interesting thing too is that you'll see, if you drive around as you get more and more into this business, you'll look at things and people's choices, and you can tell. So in paint, you can buy these paint wheels, and there's hundreds and hundreds of colors.
Yes,
But what they do is, if you've ever seen a paint chip, there's like usually 5 or 6 paint colors on that chip. but each one sort of lines up to another one. So if you buy a paint wheel, and I have one at my house, I should have brought it tonight. If you find let's just say this is the paint color I want on my house, you just can you just stay on the same level of that paint wheel, and you're like, which color goes with that? Because that's what they're doing. They're matching it up, because paint's a really funky thing. There's like hundreds of shades of white. Of white, because it's like there's a blue white, there's there's a green white, there's it's all these different kinds of whites, and it's all these different kinds of grays, and it's all these different kinds of blues and purples and all these things, right? So I used to stand there before I knew this, and I'm like, what am I choosing? Yeah. And sometimes what you need to do is stay within that. So if it's the third color up, then you stay in that third color slot, and you can see the ones that match each other.
Right.
Because we've all been to, I've seen houses that are painted a certain color, and then there's like this funky color with it, and you're like, I knew what you were trying to do. It just went a little awry, because it doesn't actually go with the color of your house. Right. Because maybe there's too much yellow in that color that you chose, and there's not enough yellow in the contrasting one. So it's one of those things that, and again, that cuts down like your options, like, so it doesn't become so overwhelming about what am I going to choose. Right. It's like I'm going, and sometimes like on our house in New Bedford, there was the color of that, we didn't change the vinyl siding, and it's like a peachy paint color, and it's just like, how do I diffuse that color? Because it's not a great color, but we weren't going to spend the money to redo it. We put black doors on. So now you see the black door, and it, and it contrasts. And that's the other thing too. You can do a glossy black door, because the trim is very is muted. It's flat. It's a flat finish. So like doing a glossy black door sort of just gives it a little bit of something, right? So it's, again, it wasn't in the budget to redo the siding. The siding was in good shape. We weren't going to do that. So how do we take sort of something that's a deficit and turn it into something where people aren't even going to see it? The other thing on that house is we just did these beautiful porches on the front too, so they really weren't paying attention to that paint color. But paint is an interesting thing, and it's funny when you look at houses that are being sold, and there's a green room and a pink room and a peach room and a purple room, and you're just like, you're trying to sell your house, and nobody can. Who's gonna go in there? Because when I look at that, I just see money. I'm like, I can't live like this. Like, I'm not going to live with a green room over here. And
I think that's the point. People who are, if you're out in the audience and you think about selling your house, I would invest in painting it. Getting it painted generic, so you got a dark cranberry, and then you got a dark brown room, and you like it.
And it's great.
But the people who are coming in, they may not like that.
It's a hard sell.
It's a hard sell.
And so when you're flipping a house, what we generally do is we have a gray that we use. It's called Halation Gray, I think. But basically it's that and a certain white trim, because if we need to paint everything, that's what's being painted. And so it's like this blank canvas for them, because you're moving your stuff in. And if you paint something that's sort of an off color, they can't use their furniture. You know what I mean? That you have to have it to be something where, and we're not doing anything funky, like I'm doing this from this.
No.
The painters go in, and it's like, this is the two colors you're using, and that's what they use.
And go for it. Exactly.
Because it just saves, that's like so many less decisions to be made, right? Every room's going to look like this. The floor is going to be this color. This is what's going to happen. So the less decisions that you put yourself up against, because it's all a translation. So we had a situation where in the house that we're helping on, and
which one? Helped on two houses.
True, but either way, a conversation was had. Don't do anything in the basement, and then we went there and they were framing the basement. And we're just like, thought we weren't doing anything in the basement. There's so much stuff that's lost. Like he's like, oh, I thought you meant this, and it's like, no, I meant don't touch the basement. And so you want it to be that people can follow the directions you're giving. So if you're like, it's this room with this color and this color trim, and then it's this room with this color and this color trim. You can't, unless you're going to stand there all day long in your flip and and say, yep, you're doing that right, because you're going to walk in and you're like, oh, hold on a second, that's color. Not what I thought was going to happen.
And I think that speaks to the importance of you have to go to your site consistently, or even if you're, because sometimes it's a long distance, you may have them hold your camera up to different things, but sometimes people don't. do that. And so they're like, oh, I asked for this, but well, you didn't manage it, you know. So part of all of this, you guys who are watching this and some people in the audience, is after you purchase the property, now comes the part of managing it. And sometimes people, and you can't be soft in managing it. You know, you've got to say, this is what I want, because this is your money, this is your business.
Yep.
And so, you know, when you're new, somewhat you could, well, my contractor don't want to do this, or this is like, well, nah, well, I'm cutting the checks. My name was on the loan. So you gotta be stern with what you want to do. Not you don't want to be a rump and be mean, but you really have to be stern about what you want, and then you really have to go, because sometimes what you'll find is this, and we've experienced this. When you picked it out initially, you like what it looked like, and then you see it on the wall, you're like, yeah, I ain't feeling this. And then you change it, you know. And so that's why going there consistently is key.
It's it's very key. And it's also just, you know, before, we like to go every week anyway, but like if they're about to start something major, make sure you're having that walkthrough about and because there's just a lot of, you know, we all receive information differently, and we all communicate in a different way. And to make sure, like this, you know, to be able to be like, this is what we're like.
This is what I mean, and this is what I want.
There's been times where we've gone and, you know, you're writing stuff on the wall, like this is what's happening here, and you know, making sure they have the right kitchen layout, and making sure that everybody has what they need to bring what you want. Because what you don't want to do is, guess what? If you don't like the paint color and they painted the whole house, you're paying for that again. Right? So that's like a huge expense. So there are certain things that you just need to be super duper clear on. And that's why the less variations of things, the easier it is for a contractor and his subs to follow that.
And more things you can get in writing is critical. Sometimes you'll shoot a video, you can do that and say, this is what I'm looking to do.
Yep.
And then sometimes, you know, not to be stereotypical, but sometimes there's a language barrier with the people you're talking to. And so, you know, you're saying one thing and then they're hearing it another way, and then it just
and
goes
don't go to
funky
another
sometimes.
part of the country. To your point, Della, like we might call something here in New England, and it's called something else somewhere else. And so you think you're communicating, and you're not. And so it's one of those things to be really, you have to be really explicit. You know, you just really do. You know, there's been times where like, I had told you guys the last time we were together, like we just do this giant order of lights and, you know, finishes and all these things. Well, when they all arrive, I'm going and putting them in the rooms where they're supposed to go, you know, and this is where this is. And so that you don't suddenly have the chandelier that was supposed to be in the dining room in somebody's bedroom, right?
Right.
So, but those are the things you have to do to get it right. Because there was, I think it was, we were going to reuse a light fixture. For whatever reason,
it was in the dumpster, wasn't it?
It was, for whatever reason, our contractor did not remember we were doing that. We went there, and I'm like, the light fixture's in the dumpster. No, I walked in, I'm just like,
or was it in the garage
I'm like,
or something?
where's the light fixture that was supposed to be moved from here to
Maybe it
there?
hadn't made the dumpster. It was in the garage at least.
It was in the dumpster. He had to go dumpster diving for that. And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, what do you mean? Didn't we talk about this last time we were here? And I'm like, where is it? He's like,
nice chandelier too.
Fortunately, nothing had been thrown onto it. It had just gotten in there. He pulled it back out, slapped it up while we were there. But it's those things, right? Because lighting fixtures can be $300, $400 easily. So I'm like, that's $300, $400 of profit.
That you keep
or
in your
money's
pocket.
being spent that we don't need to spend, right? So it's one of those things where, you know, tagging things. We talked about pulling doors out of a pile of trash the other day, and because we can reuse that in the house. It's just like all of that's money.
Stuck it in the garage.
And the other thing too is that I think sometimes people, you have to know the value of the things that are in the home. And to put it a different way, whatever you rip out, you're going to have to replace, right? So there's a project they were consulting on, and unfortunately they demoed this whole building, and so like every piece of trim, every door, everything, but it was all still good. And so I'm like, that's tens of thousands of dollars you're spending that you did not have to spend. And so it's one of those things, back to what Petey was saying about if you're not good at something, have more people come around and be like, oh, you know, give them your opinion, because maybe it is that it's not your aesthetic, but everybody
You
else
still
would
can
like
use
that.
it,
So you just
yeah.
need another opinion. And also, not to be stereotypical for men, men
Yeah,
tend
very
to, you can
masculine.
tell the flips that are done exclusively by men. You walk in, super masculine. Things are not in a place where you're like, the kitchen seems off. Like, why? Like, oh, because they didn't put something where you would put it as a woman. You're cooked in your kitchen. You're like, what did they do? You know, or the bathroom is just askew, or I'm just like,
Something's
this is
off.
real masculine, and
Yeah,
it's one of those things where you do need a feminine touch in a flip
Agreed.
in any house.
Agreed. Because that's one of the things I talk to guys about when we're talking. I said, get your wife to walk through, because you'll see one thing one way and she sees something else, and so it's the best of both worlds if you got that option, or if not, your wife's a sister, cousin, somebody who has a female toucher who will see it differently than you.
Yep.
And then obviously on the other side, you need a man's touch walking there and seeing certain things, and so
For sure. But you can
it
just
balances
tell
each
the
other.
masculine.
Oh yeah, big time.
You never want to make anything too
Big
feminine
time.
or too
Yeah,
masculine.
big time.
But you definitely do not want to lean masculine, because
No,
at the end of the
exactly.
day, when my husband and I are buying houses for ourselves, like, it's my decision.
Yeah, pretty much. I just want
And
to know
that's
where we
what
living at.
that's what
That's
usually
how-
happens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you want to make sure that it's going to speak to the right people.
You got to impress mama, y'all. You got to impress mama. So we got 4 minutes left. Any last questions before we wrap up, and then we're gonna do our last commercial about this real estate summit. You got to be there at. One last question.
Pastor Ken,
Yes, ma'am. You're on.
we on. Okay. You've talked about the tiling, the flooring and all that. You've talked about the painting of the outside of the house. Okay. And you were talking about, you kind of hit on this. When do you decide, we're inside now, when do you decide if it's going to be paint or if you're going to wallpaper?
I will tell you, on a flip, I will never, ever, ever wallpaper
Okay.
a thing.
All right.
Absolutely not. Because it takes forever to put wallpaper up. I mean, the good news now is that you can buy wallpapers that sort of peel and stick, but if someone loves
Back in the
wallpaper,
day,
they can put
they can
that
put that
right
on
on the paint that I just put up. Because
You can go over
That's
the top
true.
of it.
yeah,
Right.
Exactly.
Wallpaper is so specific to a person. Either people love it or they hate it, and even the patterns of wallpaper, people love it or they hate it.
Right,
So
yeah.
I feel like wallpaper is for your own personal
Yeah.
use.
Yeah,
I would.
that's-
It's just a lot. It's just another honestly another layer of trade that has to come in, because
Right.
painters don't wallpaper. And most people don't like to put wallpaper up. Like, they'll
Right.
charge you a lot of money for that. So
Okay.
yeah, the only time you might wallpaper, and it would have to be real, if the walls are really just a mess, and you'd have to spend more money to fix the walls than it would be to go over them and put wallpaper up. But most often they'll skim coat the walls if they're a mess, and you just paint right over that. But it's a great question. A lot of people love wallpaper, but it's like
In their own personal
in
house.
their own
most of
personal
the
house.
time.
But
Yeah.
because to take that down, if it's not the peel and stick kind, we personally, in our 3 family that we had, spent a week
Week nothing.
okay, a month.
Weeks. Yes.
There were 7 layers of wallpaper, and you'll find that because it's so hard to take wallpaper
just go
off.
over the top.
People just go over the top of it. We gained 2 inches around the whole circumference of the room because of how many layers there were.
We put a lot of
It was a
vinegar on
3rd
the
floor
walls,
walk
man.
up in the
Ugh.
summertime. It was great.
We gotta wrap this up.
Yep.
All right, y'all. Thank you guys
you.
for being here. Thank you, my love, for talking to us about design, hooking us up. All right, y'all. So this concludes our show for today. For tonight. Tonight. I don't know when you can watch it. Maybe today, this month, and so next month. I don't know who I have next month. I'm working on a couple people, so I'll let you guys know the next couple of weeks. But we want to close out. Make sure that you sign up for the Real Estate Wealth Creation Summit. If you have not done that, Eddie, put that back up, please, if you could, or Jasmine, whoever's working back there, put that up. Make sure you sign up before the May, I think 10th or whatever date that is. And then, like I said, sponsor somebody. If you don't want to go, if you're not interested, sponsor somebody else, and particularly your children or somebody else. I got a lot of calls on people say, can I send my son? Can I send my daughter? Like, yeah, send them. Because we want to get them learn this stuff as soon as possible so that they can be wealth builders and things of that nature, right? All right, my people, we will see you next week, or next month. Bye.